So the onus then that is on making it transparent, making governments accountable not just to a donor, but to their own citizens, and allowing transparency being the vehicle for citizens to hold their own governments to account. And it's coming up with some very innovative features in doing that. So I would suggest that there are things happening that we can build on that takes account of some of the problems that we've had in the past. And if I can make one other point about the question of reframing the issue, I think it is absolutely essential to reframe it. And I'll make two comments on that. Firstly, I'll describe a conversation or a discussion we had with our panelist who isn't here before. I've actually been on a panel with him previously at another meeting, the minister from Luxembourg, where he made the point that, you know, I can't ask my taxpayers to give this additional money unless we can, you know, justify it and have a good vehicle for doing it. And I said, well, again, it's a matter of framing the question. Where you see taxpayer, I see polluter. And you have to explain to them why they have to pay this because of pollution. This is not charity they're giving for poor people. This is because they're a polluter to help people to overcome the effects of that pollution. And it's a very different framing of the question. So if you keep talking about taxpayers, to me that makes no sense. These guys are polluters. The Framework Convention is about pollution, not about development assistance. And the second reframing is in the context of using climate change as a vehicle to personalize it for everybody on the planet. And I think climate change is almost unique in that it is the one problem in which every single human being on the planet is a contributor. Every one of us has a carbon footprint by virtue of what we eat, what we wear, where we live, how we move about. The order of magnitude of that footprint varies enormously, from a very minuscule footprint for people in Africa and in the edges of the islands and coastal areas of Bangladesh to ours, and to, you know, Richard Branson or whoever else. It's many orders of magnitude, but we're all part of the problem. And if we think of it that way, we can all become part of the solution. We can all do something to reduce our carbon footprint, to encourage others to do that, and most importantly for citizens of both developed and developing worlds, but primarily in the developed world, encouraging our leaders to take the kinds of global policy decisions that are necessary, and to tell them that we will follow them and we will encourage them to do that. And, you know, move from being a consumer to being an active citizen, and that's something we can all do.
Thank you very much. Let's get back to Jules. I know you had some comments about the capital flows here.
Yeah, absolutely, but I'll pick up on where Salim left off, on the framing of the problem. Because understandably, in light of the magnitude of the crisis we're facing, people are inclined to think about the framing of this as a problem. But let's try to look at it again for a moment as an opportunity. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. We are at the beginning of what will be the largest economic engine since the Industrial Revolution. Over the course of the next 40 years, mankind will find a way to drive the carbon productivity of our economies up by a factor of 10. And that will create massive number of jobs, enormous amounts of economic growth, new products, innovations, new capital flows, and mechanisms to bring also countries from the developing part of the world into the global community. So if you look at the challenges that have been posed in this discussion from that opportunity frame, suddenly some things look slightly different. Because accountability not only is a question suddenly about governments, but accountability also becomes a matter of business. And business can be held accountable to drive economic growth in a low-carbon direction. And issues about reallocation of resources and difficult decisions that governments have to make are much easier in a market mechanism. And the lady from Global Witness asked us, well, how are we going to ever marshal $450 billion that the IEA has identified as being needed for our new energy infrastructure? There is very little chance that governments will find mechanisms to do that. There is a much better likelihood that the capital markets will mobilize those size of funds. Along the same way, if we set the right policy environment, it will create a leverage mechanism for business to come in and to do what they're good at, create new products, create innovation, and distribute that innovation across the globe. When I think it was Apple came out with a new iPhone earlier this week. And it took only a week before that product was available in stores all around the world. If governments have to roll out new innovations around the world, they struggle. They find it difficult to think across borders. But global business is very good at this. So why not think about this challenge also from the framework of opportunity and leverage business into a new type of economy? And that brings me back to my plans, my low-carbon growth plans, because businesses know how to deal with a plan. They do it every 3 years. Every year they create the annual plan and the budget. So if we create these low-carbon growth plans for developed countries and for developing countries, we give them a stake in what needs to happen. We point the way. We show them where their investment is going to be relevant. We tell them where to mobilize their capital. They'll take ownership of this transition. And it will enormously reduce the burden on governments to do what is needed to do. So once again, I argue strenuously for countries putting their shoulders under creating a plan that all of the country, civil society, business and policy leaders can sign up to and say, okay, that's our pathway to low carbon prosperity. That's the capital we'll need. We'll have to have inflows for the developing world from the developed world. But we also have a lot of resources in our own country, and we'll put them to work in order to drive to a low-carbon economy.
Thank you very much. Next question, or observation. It should just work.
Hello. Yes, Monica Pagador is civil society from Peru. Well, adaptation, mitigation, words that not everybody knows or understand. I think Copenhagen should be a good opportunity to involve civil society on this process to create awareness. I definitely agree with Eddie in the importance of education and create awareness through media or through information, but clear and easy information in all languages. And climate change is a question of life or death. I think it's a question of human rights. As 1948 was the year of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, I think 2009 should be the year of the Universal Declaration Against Climate Change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And perhaps we can pass the microphone across to this side. I think you had your hand in the air first, I think, sir, and then we'll give it to you.
Okay, my name's Sarah Walpole. I'm here following some work I did at the WHO. I've got two questions. First of all, how much potential is there to use the kind of savings that are possible from climate change? So I don't just mean in terms of, for example, the airport tax that you were talking about, so that provides funds and that can be plugged in, but also in terms of many of the solutions to climate change actually being money savers, so home insulation, active transport, things like that, are potentials to create funds. And I know of the example of, for example, Germany, where those who produce energy at the local level can put it back into the grid, and therefore that kind of mode has proliferated a lot more than in the UK, where that's not possible to get the money back from the grid. How much potential is there to sort of use those kind of principles on the international level, and rather than looking at new ways of creating more money using the savings? And my second question is, how much difference would it make, or how much potential is there to further measure where the emissions come from? So, for example, at the moment, clothes that we buy, where the emissions come from another country where the clothing's produced, how much difference would that make if we were able to better allocate the emissions to those who are using the goods or the services or whatever